You wrecked my car while screwing him. Now live with your shame, both of you.
Mr. Davis? The officer's voice came through clearly on the phone, cutting through the quiet in Robert's kitchen. This is Officer Reynolds from the precinct. I'm afraid there's been an incident with your vehicle. Robert's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded as he gripped the phone tighter. What happened? Was the car damaged? His voice was shaky, the fear creeping in, his thoughts racing. Your car, it went off the cliff. Black Ridge Road, the officer continued, his tone calm but with an undertone of urgency. It's totaled, sir. But we didn't find anyone in it when we got there. Robert felt a wave of cold wash over him, his body going still. The world felt like it was moving in slow motion. No one was in the car. The words barely left his mouth, panic starting to rise in his chest, knotting his stomach. No, sir, there was no sign of anyone at the crash site, Reynolds added. We're still investigating, but it looks like the vehicle rolled down on its own. Robert stood frozen, unable to process what the officer was saying. His mind immediately went to Megan. She had been driving. Why wasn't she there? Why wasn't she with the car? Wait, Megan, was she in the car? Robert's voice cracked as his thoughts began to race, a cold fear seizing him. His breath came quicker now, the phone shaking in his hand. The officer paused for a moment, and Robert could hear him shuffling papers on the other end. No, sir, there was no one with the car. But we didn't find any sign of forced entry or anything suspicious. A wave of relief washed over Robert, but it was short-lived. He was still terrified. Where is she? What happened? Why wasn't she in the car? The words came out in a desperate rush. I need to know where she is. I need to know she's all right. The officer's voice softened, though his calm demeanor did little to reassure Robert. Sir, I understand your concern. We're still gathering information, but if you haven't heard from her, you should check in with Megan directly. Robert's hands were shaking as he held the phone, his chest tightening with each passing second. His mind was whirling with thoughts he couldn't control. What's going on? Where is she? He felt like he was losing his grip, the panic rising in waves. Sir, we're doing everything we can. If anything changes, we'll notify you, the officer said, his voice now turning more distant. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to contact us. The line clicked, and the officer hung up. Robert stood there, frozen, the phone still in his hand. What happened to her? His thoughts spiraled, the questions forming faster than he could catch them. Where is she? Why wasn't she with the car? He could feel his pulse quicken, the fear rising in his throat. The uncertainty weighed heavily on him, gnawing at his insides. Please, let her be safe. And then Robert remembered how it all began. Those times when they were young, carefree, and happy. It was years ago, at a mutual friend's party, a warm summer evening. Megan had walked in, radiant and full of energy. She had this way about her. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and she had a laugh that was contagious. He remembered how she'd effortlessly drawn everyone's attention, and how, for the first time in his life, he had felt like the luckiest man in the room just by being near her. She had asked him a simple question about a movie they had both seen. They had started talking, and before he knew it, they were laughing together, their conversation flowing effortlessly. Her warmth, her kindness, it was all so genuine, so real. He had never met anyone like her. And before he even realized it, he had fallen for her completely and hopelessly. But as the years passed, things changed. He knew they had both changed. The spark that once burned so brightly between them seemed to dim. Life got in the way. Work, responsibilities, the mundane routines of daily life. But even then, he always tried to hold on to the person he had fallen in love with. Robert was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the phone, when he heard the front door creak open. His heart skipped a beat. The sound was faint but unmistakable. He jumped to his feet, his pulse quickening, as Megan walked in. She looked disheveled, her hair messy, her face pale, but otherwise seemingly unharmed. Robert's breath caught in his throat as he took in her presence. There was something in her posture, an almost deflated quality, that made him hesitate. She was back, but she didn't look like the woman he had known. Megan, he said, his voice a mixture of relief and worry. Thank God you're back. Where were you? Are you okay? Megan paused in the doorway, her gaze locked on the floor for a moment before meeting his. She looked at him with eyes that seemed lost, her own face a mix of exhaustion and confusion. I'm fine, Robert. she said, brushing past him and dropping her keys onto the counter. She didn't meet his eyes again. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. Robert's chest tightened as he watched her, his hand still gripping the edge of the table. What happened? I was so worried. The car, the crash. His voice trailed off as he moved toward her, needing to make sure she was really all right. He took in her pale face, her distracted movements. She was too calm, too distant, and it unsettled him more than anything. She met his gaze, but there was something off about the way she held herself. She took a deep breath before speaking again, almost as if the words were rehearsed. I don't know, Robert. I was at the store, and when I came out, the car was gone. I thought someone had stolen it. Her voice trembled slightly, but she quickly steadied herself. I was in a panic, and then I got a call from the police saying it went off the road. I don't know what happened to it. Robert's heart thudded in his chest, but his mind raced faster. Stolen? His voice cracked, his thoughts tumbling over one another. You're telling me someone stole it and drove it off a cliff? He shook his head in disbelief, a knot forming in his stomach. You're sure that's what happened? Megan glanced away for a brief moment, her hands wringing together as if she were trying to find the right words. I don't know, Robert, she murmured, her voice quieter now. I was just so scared. When I got there, it was already gone. I didn't know where to go or who to ask. He stared at her for a long moment, his mind trying to piece the story together. The events didn't add up. His thoughts kept returning to the crash, to the fact that the car had gone off the road. Why hadn't she been there? Why wasn't she with it? He wanted to believe her. He really did. The relief that she was standing here, alive and in one piece, pushed the nagging doubts to the back of his mind, at least for a moment. The important thing is that you're all right, Robert finally said, his voice softening. I was so worried, Megan. I didn't know where you were. Megan gave him a weak smile, her eyes full of exhaustion. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you worry. It's just, I don't know what happened. She reached out, pulling him into an embrace, and Robert hesitated for only a second before wrapping his arms around her. His heart was still racing, but the weight of relief flooded through him. They stood there for a long moment, the silence of the room hanging heavy between them. The quiet hum of the house seemed to grow louder as Robert felt a mix of emotions surge inside him. He had her back, but something felt wrong. Finally, Megan pulled away slightly and glanced at him, the tension in her shoulders still there even as she tried to relax. I'm going to take a bath. I need to clear my head, she said quietly, before turning and walking toward the bathroom. Robert watched her leave, his thoughts swirling. He stood motionless for a moment, the silence of the house pressing down on him. He hadn't wanted to jump to conclusions, but something about her story didn't sit right. Why didn't she mention anything about the crash when she came in? Why the delay? His mind reeled with the questions that had started to pile up. He felt a cold chill settle over him. The sound of the bathroom door shutting behind Megan was followed by the sound of water running, filling the silence with a soft rush. Robert remained in the kitchen, his mind working faster than ever. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Something's off, he thought, shaking his head. The inconsistency in Megan's story gnawed at him, making the doubt grow with each passing second. His eyes returned to the phone on the table, the recent call from the police still lingering in his mind. Stolen? The word echoed in his thoughts, mocking him. A stolen car. And then a crash into a ravine? His heart pounded as the events replayed in his mind, the confusion tightening its grip. Why wasn't she in the car? Why hadn't she been hurt? Why didn't she even seem upset? Robert moved toward the window, his thoughts racing. What's really going on here? He wondered, staring out at the street, watching the light of the evening sunset slowly fade. The uncertainty gnawed at him. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. I need answers. The words were clear in his mind now. There was no denying it. He had to find out the truth, but he couldn't confront her just yet. He had no concrete evidence to call her out on. He had to wait. For now, he would pretend to believe her, give her the benefit of the doubt. But Robert knew deep down that this wasn't over. His hand hovered over the phone again. I'll get to the bottom of this, he thought. I'll find out what really happened. I need to know the truth. Robert drove through the winding road leading to the crash site, his hands tight on the steering wheel. The drive was almost mechanical, his mind replaying the events over and over. The crash, Megan's strange behavior, and the unanswered questions that seemed to loom over everything. His thoughts spun between confusion, anger, and disbelief. How could this happen? How could she have let this happen? As he neared the site, Robert's stomach churned. The area looked isolated and remote, surrounded by tall trees that almost seemed to swallow up the road. The silence here felt unnatural. No sounds of distant traffic, no voices, just the wind rustling the leaves and the hum of his own breathing. It didn't seem right. How had Megan gotten here? Why had the car ended up in a ravine? His mind kept circling back to those questions as he parked at the edge of the clearing. This doesn't feel like an accident. When he reached the location, Robert stopped the car at the edge of the clearing, the trees stretching out before him like a dark canopy. The wreckage of his car lay in front of him, a twisted mass of metal and broken glass. It was nearly unrecognizable. The front end was crushed beyond repair, the tires deflated and bent out of shape. The impact had been severe. The car had rolled down into the ravine with enough force to leave it in such a state. The wreckage seemed almost too perfect in its destruction, like a scene from a movie. It didn't seem real. Robert stood there, rooted to the spot, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. What really happened here? He thought to himself, still grappling with the uncertainty, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He was supposed to be worried about Megan's safety, but there was something in the pit of his stomach that told him it wasn't just about a car crash. Something was wrong. The images from the police call, the uncertainty, Megan's strange calmness when she'd returned home. Everything was colliding in his mind, but the one thing he couldn't shake was the fear. Why didn't she tell me the truth? But there was no time to waste on uncertainty now. He needed answers. He needed to know what had really happened. I have to find out. Robert took a deep breath and stepped carefully around the wreckage, his boots crunching on the gravel and dirt beneath him. He scanned the area, his eyes darting between the wreck and the surrounding trees. Something didn't feel right. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was as if the air here was thicker, more oppressive. It was like the clearing itself held secrets, as if the very ground was hiding something. His gaze shifted, and that's when he noticed them. Several small cameras mounted on trees and rocks scattered around the perimeter of the clearing. They weren't hard to spot, but they were well hidden enough that he might have missed them if he hadn't been looking closely. Photo traps, he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. He recognized them immediately, wildlife monitoring cameras. They were used to capture images of animals in the area. Robert had seen these kinds of cameras before, set up by nature conservation groups, researchers, or hunters to track animal activity. Nothing unusual, nothing to raise suspicion, or so he thought. But the placement of the cameras caught his attention. They were scattered around the crash site. Not just one or two, but several. The idea of these cameras being placed around the area felt off. Something about their positioning made him uneasy. Why were they so focused on this particular spot? What are these doing here? Robert thought, his curiosity spiking. The fact that they were positioned so carefully around the crash site raised a red flag. Could they have been placed here recently? Or were they always here? He approached one of the cameras cautiously, as if it might give him some clue. The camera was mounted about 5 feet off the ground on a sturdy tree trunk. Its lens was directed toward a well-worn path that ran through the forest. But that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the fact that the camera had clearly been there for some time. The surrounding area was undisturbed, the dirt and leaves undisturbed, yet these cameras were perfectly positioned. Someone must have been here recently, Robert thought, his instincts kicking in. He carefully examined the camera, then glanced around at the others. He needed to know what they had seen, what they had recorded. His curiosity deepened. Without thinking, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and slid the camera's memory card out. It clicked softly, and he quickly inserted it into his phone, eager to see what footage it might contain. Back in his car, Robert inserted the memory card into his laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing a folder filled with video files. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked on the first video, unsure of what he would find. The footage loaded, grainy and unclear at first, but the moment the video started, Robert froze. Then he saw her. Megan. She stepped out of the car, her movements fluid and graceful, her laughter ringing through the still air as she closed the door behind her. There was a man with her, someone Robert didn't recognize at all. He was tall, wearing a light jacket and sunglasses, but Robert couldn't make out many other details from this distance. The two of them were standing side by side, looking out at the view, their heads tilted slightly as they shared some quiet moment. The camera caught the warmth of the sun glinting off the windshield, making everything seem still and idyllic. For a brief second, Robert's heart relaxed. Everything looks normal. They're just standing there. Nothing to worry about. But that thought was immediately crushed by what happened next. Megan and the man, whoever he was, stood close together. Their bodies were angled toward one another, a closeness that Robert couldn't ignore. Then, without any hesitation, they leaned toward each other. At first, the kiss was slow and tentative, like a soft exploration, their lips brushing gently. The camera caught the moment in eerie detail, their bodies leaning in closer as if the world had melted away around them. They shared a quiet intimacy that felt personal, private. Then, the kiss deepened. Their hands found each other, and for a brief moment, Robert's world tilted. He couldn't breathe. He felt his chest tighten as the scene on the screen unfolded in front of him. The camera didn't hide anything. There was no ambiguity about what was happening. They were lost in the kiss, oblivious to the world around them. A sharp sense of betrayal sliced through Robert, far sharper than he had expected. He gripped the edge of the seat, his fingers digging into the leather as his chest constricted. This is how it happened, he thought, as anger built like a storm in his chest. This was never just an accident. But then, just as the kiss reached its peak, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by a sudden rustling sound from the bushes. The two of them broke apart in a flash, startled. The camera captured their sudden, wide-eyed expressions as they looked around, trying to locate the source of the noise. A quick flash of movement, a rabbit darting through the underbrush, startled them both. They turned toward the noise, and Robert could see the unease spreading across their faces. It was a small thing, a rabbit, but to them, it was enough to jolt them back into reality. The moment was over. They quickly scrambled back into the car, the urgency of their movements clear. But there was no panic in their steps. They weren't in any kind of rush, not like someone would be if their life was truly in danger. They didn't know what was coming next. Robert watched, his breath shallow as they got into the car. It didn't make sense. Why were they acting so nonchalant? Why didn't they immediately drive away? And then something caught his eye. The car began to move. He squinted at the screen. Wait, the wheels were shifting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the car started to inch forward. It was subtle at first, just a small roll, but it was enough to make Robert's heart skip a beat. What's going on? He thought, his mind racing. The car's moving! The camera angle shifted slightly as the car rocked back and forth. Robert's eyes narrowed. The wheels turned again, this time more noticeably, and the car edged toward the cliff. He could feel the panic rising in his chest. No way. He replayed the footage in his mind, trying to piece together the situation. He had to be seeing this wrong, right? But as the video continued, it became clear. They left the car in neutral. They didn't secure it, didn't even think to check the handbrake. The car's rolling on its own. Robert's pulse quickened. They didn't put it in park. He felt a sickening realization wash over him. Megan and her lover had been so wrapped up in each other that they had let the car slip, not even noticing it was moving until it was too late. He could see the fear settle over them in real time, their faces shifting from confusion to alarm as the car began rolling closer and closer to the ravine. They scrambled frantically, Megan's hands gripping the wheel, her lover fumbling with the gear shift, trying to regain control. They were disoriented, panicked, and desperate, but it was too late. The car was already beyond their reach. The footage didn't lie. They caused this. Robert could feel the rage bubbling up again, but there was a calmness to his anger now. This wasn't an accident. They had caused it. Their carelessness, their distraction, this was their fault. Then, as if in slow motion, the video captured the exact moment of their escape. Realizing the car was no longer under their control, Megan and the man jumped out of the vehicle in one fluid motion. The camera caught their desperate movements as they scrambled to put distance between themselves and the rolling car. They tumbled to the ground in a heap of limbs, and the car, now completely unhinged, continued its slow descent toward the cliff. Megan and her lover stood up, dusting themselves off, looking back at the car one last time. Robert could hear their breaths in the silence of the footage as they watched the car disappear over the edge of the ravine. The video ended abruptly, leaving Robert with the image of the car tumbling and the two of them standing there, helpless, watching it all unfold. Robert sat back in his seat, his body numb, as the weight of what he had seen crashed over him. He replayed the video over and over in his mind, his hands gripping the laptop as his thoughts raced. So, this is what happened. The car didn't just roll on its own. They caused it. They had been too distracted, too careless, and now they had destroyed everything. The betrayal hit him hard again, this time sharper than before. They were too caught up in each other to notice. They were too busy enjoying the moment to think about the consequences. He let the video replay one more time, watching the final moments in silence. His thoughts were spinning. Anger, disbelief, hurt, but most of all, there was certainty now. This wasn't just an accident. Megan and her lover had caused it. As the screen flickered off, Robert sat in the stillness of the car, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "I have the proof," he whispered to himself. He felt his pulse still racing, but there was no turning back now. He knew exactly what had happened. Now, the only question was, what was he going to do about it? When Robert finally pulled into the driveway at home, he felt a tight knot in his chest. The house was quiet, as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the door, his movements mechanical. As he pushed it open, he found Megan sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of water in front of her. She looked up, offering him a tired smile. "Hey, you're back," she said, her voice light but tinged with something Robert couldn't quite place. Was it guilt or just exhaustion? "Yeah." His voice was steady, almost too calm. "I was out checking the car," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You know, the one that was stolen?" Her expression faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered, shrugging as she stood up. "I'm sorry, Robert. I was so scared. I just didn't know what to do." He didn't react right away. "It's fine," he said, his tone flat. "But we need to file a report. The police need the information." Megan's relief was palpable. She nodded quickly, a hint of nervous energy bubbling beneath the surface. "Of course. I just want to get this over with. It's been such a nightmare." Robert drove Megan to the police station the next morning, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The weight of everything he had learned hung over him like a dark cloud. He kept his thoughts in check, not allowing the betrayal to seep through his calm exterior. Megan sat beside him, nervously fiddling with her purse, pretending like everything was normal. But Robert knew better. As they entered the station, Megan glanced at him, giving a forced smile. "I'm just glad we're getting this over with," she said, her voice strained. "I just want to forget about it." Robert nodded, the hollow feeling in his chest growing. He didn't speak. Instead, he led her to the front desk, where an officer greeted them. "We're here to file a report on the car," Robert said, his tone neutral. "My wife, Megan, has been trying to help us identify the thief who stole it." The officer nodded and gestured toward a small room at the back of the station. "Follow me. We have an artist here who can work with you on the composite." Megan gave Robert a quick look, almost apologetic, but he ignored it. He knew she had to keep up the lie. He had no intention of confronting her yet. Not until he had all the pieces in place. Inside the room, Megan sat down at a table across from a sketch artist. The artist was a middle-aged man with thick glasses and a tired expression, but he greeted Megan with a polite smile. "All right, Mrs. Davis, let's get started." Megan nodded, her hands still clasped tightly together. She glanced at Robert, who gave her a small, reassuring smile, though his mind was elsewhere. He was still processing everything, the lie, the footage, and the betrayal. But he had to play his part now. "I just need you to describe the man you saw," the sketch artist said, his pencil poised above the paper. "What did he look like?" Megan hesitated for a moment, but then her voice grew steadier as she began to speak, fabricating the details. "Well, he was about 6 feet tall, dark hair, kind of scruffy looking. Maybe in his early 40s? She glanced at Robert, but he didn't react, simply nodding to encourage her. "Go on," the artist said, waiting for more details. Megan paused, thinking. "He had a beard, a short one, and his clothes. I think they were dark. Maybe a jacket." She trailed off, trying to recall something that seemed convincing enough to make the story believable. "Was there anything else?" "Anything distinguishing about him?" the artist asked, scribbling rapidly as she spoke. Megan bit her lip. He had this kind of confident look about him, like he knew exactly what he was doing. She paused, her fingers nervously tapping the table. And he didn't seem scared or anything, just cold, you know? Robert's mind raced, but he kept his face neutral. The sketch artist continued to work, adding the details Megan provided, his pencil moving quickly across the page. The whole process took about half an hour. As the sketch began to take shape, Robert stared at it, still numb. This man doesn't even exist, he thought to himself. He's just a fabrication, an invention to cover up the truth. Finally, the artist turned the page around, revealing the composite sketch to Megan. "How does this look?" he asked, waiting for her approval. Megan stared at the drawing for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, that looks like him," she said, her voice lacking the conviction that it had moments before. It was a forced affirmation. "Great," the artist said, standing up and gathering his things. "We'll get this out to the team and see if it helps with the investigation. Thanks for your time, Mrs. Davis." Megan smiled weakly at the sketch artist. "Thank you," she said, then turned to Robert. "Is that it?" Robert stood up slowly, his mind still spinning. "For now," he replied, "we'll just have to wait and see what happens." As they left the room, Megan turned to him, her voice low. "Do you think it's enough?" "The police will find him, won't they?" Robert gave her a brief, almost dismissive glance. "I don't know," he replied, "but I'm sure they'll try. We did our part." The two of them walked out of the station, Robert feeling the weight of the lie still hanging in the air. Megan had told the story she thought she needed to, but Robert could see the cracks in it. He wasn't fooled. "I know the truth," he thought. But for now, he would play along. He needed to gather more evidence, make sure his next move would be the right one. The walk to the car felt heavier than before. Robert had more questions now than ever, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Megan and her lover get away with this. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and stopped at Alex's name. Alex was an old friend, someone Robert had known for years, a lawyer with connections, someone who could get things done. Robert wasn't proud of what he was about to ask, but he knew it was the only way to get the answers he needed. Without thinking twice, Robert quickly forwarded the footage to Alex's phone, along with a short message. "Can you identify the man in this video?" He dialed the number and waited, the phone ringing in his ear, his heart beating a little faster. "Alex, I need a favor." Robert's voice was steady, but there was a hint of urgency behind his words. "It's about Megan. I need you to find out who this guy on video is." Alex was quiet for a moment. "Megan? Your wife?" The suspicion in his tone was clear. "Yeah," Robert replied, his teeth clenching. "I need to know who she's been seeing. Can you help me with that?" Alex let out a low whistle. "That sounds pretty serious." "What's going on?" Robert paused, not wanting to go into too much detail. "I just need to know everything about him. I don't care how you do it. Just find out who he is." There was a long pause on the other end, and Robert could almost hear Alex thinking it through. "All right, I can pull some strings. I'll get back to you in a day or two, okay?" "Thanks," Robert said, a sense of relief washing over him. "I appreciate it." 2 days later, Robert received a message from Alex. He opened it quickly, and as his eyes scanned the text, his stomach dropped. "Found him. Name's Zach Graham. He's a politician. Pretty high-profile stuff. Running for governor. Very conservative. Big on family values. Married, with kids." "Funny, right?" Robert read the message again, his pulse quickening. Zach Graham. The name seemed familiar, but it took a moment for it to fully click. Graham. He remembered hearing his name on the news recently. Zach Graham was not just any politician. He was a prominent conservative figure, a man known for his strong religious views and his family-first platform. He was positioning himself to run for governor with a campaign that appealed to the deeply conservative base of the state. "This is the guy?" Robert muttered to himself, staring at the phone screen. He couldn't believe it. Megan had been having an affair with a man who wasn't just a random lover. He was a public figure. A man who stood on a platform of moral superiority, who preached about family values while secretly tearing apart his own family, and someone who was now tied to Robert's own personal pain. Robert leaned back in his chair, his thoughts racing. A man like him, a man who stands for everything I hate. This is more than just a betrayal. This is hypocrisy. His fingers gripped the edge of the table, his mind already racing with ideas. He had always known that a man like Zach Graham had secrets. No one in politics, especially someone with such a clean-cut image, could be that perfect. And now, Robert had all the evidence he needed to bring down this self-righteous man. This could be the perfect chance to ruin him, Robert thought, a dark plan beginning to take shape in his mind. He wants to be governor? Let's see how he does with a scandal hanging over his head. He could already picture it. Zach's perfect public image shattered, exposed for the hypocrite he was. Robert knew he had to make the most of this moment. He had the leverage. He had the power to destroy him. Robert stood up from the table, pacing around the room. His mind was set. He would use Zach's political ambitions against him, exposing the hypocrisy that lay at the heart of the man's carefully constructed persona. It's time for him to face the consequences of his actions, Robert thought, feeling the weight of his decision. He wasn't going to just let Megan's affair slide. He wasn't going to let her lover continue his life as if nothing had happened. Zach Graham would pay for his role in tearing apart Robert's life. The plan was forming in Robert's mind, a public revelation, something so damaging that it would be impossible to ignore. He would make sure Zach's campaign for governor would end before it even began. He could feel the power shift in his hands. This was more than just revenge for a cheating wife. It was about exposing a liar, a hypocrite, someone who had used his public image to climb the political ladder while hiding his true nature beneath a facade of respectability. Let's see how he handles this, Robert muttered to himself, a dark smile tugging at his lips. He had his plan, and nothing, not even Megan, would stop him from following through. The evening air was thick with anticipation as Robert stood outside the venue, watching the crowd of well-dressed, eager faces. The building was filled with hopefuls, all gathering for Zach Graham's political rally. His campaign for governor had been gaining momentum, and the room buzzed with excitement. Posters bearing his clean-cut image decorated the walls, and the air was electric with expectation. Robert's pulse quickened, not from the excitement of the event, but from the plan he had meticulously set into motion. He had arrived early, and now, standing at the back of the room, he could hear the voices around him rising in support of Graham. There was no denying the man's charisma. Zach had an image that made people believe in him. He had crafted a life based on morality, family values, and religious integrity, but Robert knew better. Let's see how he handles the truth, Robert thought, as his hand hovered over his phone. A few minutes passed, and then the crowd grew quieter as Zach Graham took the stage. The room went still, and the spotlight shone on him as he stepped up to the podium, a confident smile on his face. His campaign slogan, "For a Better Tomorrow," flashed on the large screen behind him. Robert couldn't help but feel disgusted. The man on stage, so full of righteousness, was a fraud, and Robert was about to expose him for the world to see. As Zach began to speak, Robert's fingers worked quickly, discreetly, behind his back. His phone screen glowed faintly in the dim light. He had already prepared the video, saved it securely, and made sure everything was set up. He knew the perfect moment to strike. The truth had to come out now. The video was short, only a few minutes, but it held everything Robert needed to destroy Zach's political career. As Zach began to speak about family values and the importance of a strong moral foundation, Robert took a deep breath and clicked the play button. The screen behind Zach flickered. The first few seconds of the video almost unnoticeable in the dim lighting. The crowd was still listening attentively to Zach, oblivious to what was about to unfold. The video started playing, showing Megan and Zach's earlier encounter in the forest clearing, caught on the wildlife cameras. Robert watched the screen with a mix of satisfaction and anger. There they were, Megan, his wife, and Zach, her lover, walking away from the car and toward each other. They kissed, their bodies pressing against one another, completely unaware of the camera watching them. Then, the car started rolling slowly, inching toward the ravine. The video caught the moment of panic as they scrambled back into the vehicle, realizing too late what was happening. The footage continued to roll, showing the car slipping closer to the edge of the cliff. They jumped out at the last moment, just as the car disappeared from the view of the camera. Robert felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as the footage ended, but he wasn't finished. The crowd's reaction was immediate. There was a gasp of disbelief, followed by murmurs. Some people turned to each other, confusion spreading across the room. Robert felt a rush of adrenaline as he stood there, watching the shock ripple through the audience. His eyes locked on Zach, who stood frozen on the stage, staring at the screen behind him in horror. Zach's face drained of color as the video ended, the room now fully aware of the betrayal playing out on the screen. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around, desperate for a way to salvage the situation, but it was too late. The damage was done. Robert stepped forward from the back of the room, moving with purpose toward the front. The microphone on the stage was still live, and Zach's eyes darted between the screen and Robert. "You know, Zach," Robert called out, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "you can't hide your secrets forever. And you definitely can't run for governor when your personal life is so full of lies and hypocrisy." His voice was steady, but the anger behind his words was clear. "The truth always finds a way out." Zach stumbled over his words, his composure completely shattered. This is a misunderstanding," he said, trying to regain his footing. It's not what it looks like." But the panic in his eyes betrayed him. The room erupted into chaos. Robert didn't need to say anything more. The damage had been done. People began pulling out their phones, filming the moment. News cameras were flashing, catching every moment of Zach's downfall. The media was already buzzing, the scandal breaking out like wildfire. His carefully constructed image, built on family values and conservative morality, was crumbling before his eyes. Within minutes, members of his political party began to murmur among themselves. "We can't have him as our candidate. This is over. We need to pull him from the race." As Zach's campaign advisors rushed to the stage, trying to manage the damage control, it was clear that Zach's political career was over. The party officials, once staunch supporters, were now distancing themselves from him, murmuring that his candidacy was no longer viable. The media coverage exploded, broadcasting the video across the nation. Zach's perfect image, the one he had so carefully built, was shattered. News outlets picked up the story, airing it on every channel. Robert stood there, watching it all unfold. He could feel the weight of what he had just set in motion, but it wasn't over yet. By the time Robert left the venue, the scandal was already making headlines. The world knew who Zach Graham truly was. He had fallen from grace, and Robert had made sure of it. He leaned against the car, the satisfaction of revenge tinged with the reality that nothing would ever be the same again. "That's what you get," Robert thought. "You don't get to ruin my life and walk away without consequences." Robert arrived home, his footsteps heavy as he pushed open the door, still reeling from the chaos of the day. The shock of what had just unfolded at Zach Graham's campaign event was still fresh in his mind. But the one thing that had been nagging at him for hours was the moment he would have to face Megan. The fallout from the scandal would reach her soon, and he knew it wouldn't take long for the truth to seep through her carefully constructed lies. As he entered the house, Robert immediately noticed the TV was on in the living room, the volume muted. Megan was standing in front of the screen, her eyes wide as she stared at the news report. The image on the screen was unmistakable, the video from the wildlife cameras, showing Megan and Zach in the clearing, caught in the act. His stomach twisted with a sense of triumph and dread. She hadn't seen him yet. Robert took a few moments to observe her, the way her fingers clenched nervously around the edge of the sofa, her body tense as the news anchor's voice filled the room. "This just in. A shocking video has surfaced showing a leading gubernatorial candidate, Zach Graham, in a compromising situation involving a married woman and a stolen vehicle." Megan gasped, her face draining of color. She spun around when she heard the door close behind Robert, her eyes locking with his in panic. She stood frozen for a moment, unable to find the words. "Robert," she stammered, taking a step toward him. I can explain." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he simply stared at her, letting the silence hang between them. The betrayal, the lies. It was all so clear now. He could barely comprehend how she had thought she could keep it from him. "Explain?" Robert finally said, his voice sharp with restrained anger. "What exactly is there to explain, Megan?" Her gaze darted nervously to the screen, where her face was now clearly visible, frozen in a moment of intimacy with Zach. Her hands trembled as she walked over to the TV, quickly turning the volume down, her voice growing frantic. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, her words tumbling out quickly, almost too quickly. "It's all a misunderstanding. That video, it's all fake. Photoshop, you don't understand." Her voice was rising, the desperation in her tone becoming more and more evident as she tried to gather herself. "It's from Zach's enemies. They're just trying to ruin him." I don't even know that man. Robert let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You don't know him? Is that what you're going with? His voice was low, filled with disgust. Megan, don't lie to me. I've seen the footage. I have the proof. The video you and Zach thought you could keep hidden. It's real. Megan's face flushed with panic as her back straightened, a flicker of realization crossing her eyes. No, Robert, it's not real, she insisted, shaking her head frantically. It's some kind of trick. You've got to believe me. You can't think I wouldn't do that to you. Robert's jaw tightened, and he took a slow step toward her. You think I don't know the truth? You think I didn't see the footage with my own eyes? His voice dropped, growing cold. It's not just a fake. It's not a Photoshop job. It's a video. And I'm the one who released it? Megan froze, her eyes widening as the shock hit her like a physical blow. What do you mean? You released it? Her voice cracked. You did this? Why? Robert stood still, watching her face twist in disbelief. He was almost relieved in a strange way to see the shock on her face. This time, she couldn't lie her way out of it. I didn't want to do this, but you gave me no choice, he said coldly. You think I didn't know? I know exactly what happened, Megan. I saw everything. You were with him. You let it happen. And now it's all out there for everyone to see. Megan opened her mouth, but no words came out. She seemed to search for an explanation, for a way to make it all go away, but there was nothing she could say that would undo what Robert had already seen. The silence between them stretched, and Robert felt a strange calmness settling over him. The anger was still there, but it was quieter now, more controlled. He had everything he needed to make her face the consequences. I didn't want this, Megan. I didn't want to have to expose you, but you made me. You lied. And I'm done. Megan stepped back, her face flushed with frustration and fear. Please, Robert, you don't understand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you. Then why did you? Robert's voice was cold, devoid of emotion now. Why did you betray me? Why did you do this? She opened her mouth to respond, but there was nothing left to say. Her eyes darted away from him, unable to meet his gaze. Robert walked toward the door, his heart heavy but steady. You can't take it back now, he said quietly, the words hanging in the air between them. I'll handle the rest. He didn't wait for her to respond. He didn't need to hear any more lies, any more excuses. He was done. Megan had made her choices, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. Then, before either of them could speak again, the sound of a loud, forceful knock on the door interrupted them. It was sharp, demanding, and filled the room with a sense of finality. Megan froze. Who's that? She asked, her voice trembling. Before Robert could answer, the door burst open with a loud crash. 2 police officers rushed in, their uniforms crisp and their faces unreadable. They moved quickly, their eyes scanning the room before one of them stepped forward, his voice authoritative and calm. Megan Davis! The officer called, his gaze fixed on her. Megan took a step back, a look of pure panic crossing her face, as she stumbled back into the kitchen, almost knocking over a chair. What? What's going on? Why are you here? We're placing you under arrest, the officer said, his tone firm. You're being charged with evading responsibility and vandalism in relation to the accident that occurred with your husband's vehicle. The words hit Megan like a ton of bricks. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her body trembling. No, this isn't right, she cried out. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't. Before she could finish her sentence, the second officer moved in and placed a hand on her arm, guiding her toward the door. Please, you don't understand, Megan shouted, her voice rising in panic. This is all just a mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But the officers remained impassive, their hands firmly on her, making it clear that this was no longer a conversation. In a flash of desperation, Megan turned to Robert, her face contorting in a mix of fury and anguish. You're going to let them take me away? You're just going to stand there and let them do this to me? She lunged toward him, her hands flailing as she reached for his chest, but Robert remained unfazed, stepping back just enough to avoid her touch. You're the one who got yourself into this mess, Megan, Robert said coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then suddenly, Megan's eyes flashed with something else. It wasn't fear. It was venom. She took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she glared at Robert. You know, Robert, she spat, her words coming out like venom. The Zex with Zach, it was so incredible. So much better than anything you could ever give me. It was worth destroying the damn car. Hell, we didn't even care. The words hung in the air like a slap, and for a moment Robert's chest tightened with anger. Megan's voice shook with a mix of rage and defiance. She was trying to hurt him, to provoke him, to make him feel as small and insignificant as she could. But Robert's expression remained calm, almost detached. He took a slow breath, unfazed by her words. Is that so? His voice was cool, as if he were discussing something trivial. Well, I'm glad you got what you wanted. But it seems like I'll be getting something better out of this deal. Megan's eyes narrowed, confused and desperate. What are you talking about? She hissed. Robert leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but the calmness of it made it all the more terrifying. I'll gladly drive my new car, the one you're going to pay for, to watch you do the most humiliating community service. Cleaning the streets, picking up trash, scrubbing toilets, all of it. I'm sure it will be a good reminder of what happens when you betray someone who loved you. Megan's face turned white with shock. She stood frozen, trying to process his words. The realization hit her like a wave. The full weight of the consequences of her actions was crashing down on her. No, Robert, please! Her voice broke as she stumbled back, a mixture of disbelief and anger in her eyes. You can't do this to me. But Robert wasn't listening anymore. His expression remained unchanged. You've done enough, Megan. Now it's time for you to face the consequences. The officers, still holding her, moved toward the door, and Megan's body jerked as they guided her out. I didn't mean to hurt you, she screamed, her voice frantic, tears starting to stream down her face. I was just lost, and Zach, he made me feel alive. You didn't care about me anymore? Robert watched her go, his expression hardening with each word she screamed. He couldn't bring himself to care anymore. He had given her everything, his love, his trust, his loyalty, and she had betrayed him. There was no going back from this. As the door slammed shut behind her, Robert felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. The plan had worked. She was finally facing the consequences of her actions, and Zach, her lover, was already dealing with his own political downfall. He turned to the officers, who had stayed silent through the entire exchange. Take her to jail, he said coldly, his eyes never leaving the door she had just walked through, and let her know that I'm not done yet. As they left, Robert stood alone in the empty room, his mind already shifting to what came next. His life, it seemed, had taken an irreversible turn, but now he was in control. He had the power. Megan would pay for what she had done, and he wasn't about to let her or Zach get away with it. 3 years had passed since Megan's sentencing. The consequences of her betrayal had been swift and harsh. She had been convicted not only for evading responsibility after the car crash, but also for the damage done to Robert's vehicle, which was now deemed irreparable. In the end, the justice system had sentenced her to 2 years in prison, followed by mandatory community service. During her time in prison, Robert had moved on, and her punishment continued, not just behind bars, but in the harsh public work detail she was now forced to endure. Megan's crime, her affair, and her careless actions had left her life in ruins. The once glamorous woman who had charmed Robert with her warmth and beauty was now relegated to cleaning the sewers, scraping away the filth from the city's underground infrastructure. Every day she wore the dreaded orange jumpsuit, the symbol of her punishment. Every day she was reminded of the life she had destroyed, her own life, Robert's, and their families. But Robert, he had moved on. Life had a way of surprising you, didn't it? When Megan had been carted off to prison, Robert was devastated. The betrayal had cut him deep, but he soon realized that some wounds healed faster than others. He had rebuilt his life piece by piece, just as he rebuilt his own identity. And in doing so, he found Claire, a woman who was everything Megan wasn't, honest, compassionate, and most importantly, loyal. They had married. Claire had brought light back into Robert's life, and together, they had a daughter, a beautiful, happy little girl who had filled the void Megan had left. Their new life was peaceful, happy, and full of love. Claire had even helped Robert replace his old car, the one Megan had destroyed in her reckless actions. The new car, a sleek, polished convertible, was a symbol of Robert's fresh start. It wasn't just a car, it was a sign of his triumph over the past, his victory over the betrayal that had once haunted him. One sunny afternoon, Robert drove through the familiar streets with Claire and their daughter. The wind flowed through the open roof of the convertible, and the sunlight bathed the car in warmth. His daughter laughed in the back seat, a sound that filled Robert's heart with joy. Claire was beside him, smiling, the woman he now shared his life with. As they turned the corner, Robert's eyes flicked to the side of the road. He slowed the car, a chill running down his spine as he recognized the familiar spot where he had passed countless times before. But today, everything felt different. There, on the side of the road, was Megan. She was wearing the same faded orange jumpsuit, a symbol of the humiliation she had endured over the last 3 years. Her face, once radiant and full of life, now looked haggard, worn by time and hardship. Her shoulders were slumped as she worked, scrubbing at the grimy pipes of the city's drainage system. Her movements were mechanical, her body exhausted from the long hours of back-breaking work. She looked up briefly, but when she saw the car, her eyes widened in recognition. Robert's heart did not skip a beat. He did not feel anger, nor did he feel pity. He simply felt nothing. The woman he had loved was now just a stranger, a shadow of the person she had once been. He glanced at Claire, who was already watching him, the question in her eyes. Robert smiled softly at her, his heart swelling with love for the family he had now. Look at our life, he thought. This is what matters now. He didn't slow down. The car's engine hummed steadily as he kept his foot on the accelerator, moving smoothly past the scene. As they drove past Megan, Robert couldn't help but notice how much her life had fallen apart. There she was, scraping away the remnants of her past, her dignity and self-worth shattered. She had been reduced to a broken woman, cleaning the very streets she once walked with pride. Megan's eyes followed the car, her heart sinking. She saw Robert, but he didn't look at her. Instead, he was smiling at the woman beside him, the woman who had taken everything Megan had once held dear, the woman who had replaced her, the woman who had given Robert a family while Megan was left to clean the remnants of her own mistakes. For a brief moment, Megan's gaze flicked to the back seat, where the small, innocent face of Robert's daughter smiled up at him. This is it, Megan thought bitterly, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. Robert was happy. He had everything he needed. And she had nothing. As Robert drove away, the sound of his daughter's laughter filling the car, he couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. Megan had made her choices, and now she was paying for them. The world outside seemed to brighten. Robert smiled, his arm resting comfortably around Claire's shoulders. Their daughter held her small stuffed animal in her hands, content in the back seat. This is the life I deserve, Robert thought as they drove on, their family's future stretching out ahead of them. Megan, meanwhile, stood on the side of the road, her back hunched in exhaustion as she cleaned the gutters, the weight of her past on her shoulders. She had no one left to blame but herself.